Okay, welcome to Bitrix24 Live. I am Damien Edwards, the Commercial Manager of Interface. We're Bitrix24 Gold Partners based in the UK and with offices in the US and Dubai. Our contact details are on the screen there. If you want to ask any questions, post them in the chat window within YouTube, please, or email them to live@interface.com. If you want to ask any questions during the week, you can send them to the same email address. We'll start with some questions that have come in during the week. But if you want to get in touch with us generally, our contact details are on the screen there. We'll provide a demo for you, explain about the different features of Bitrix. Probably do a one-to-one demo for you and explain the sort of specific requirements, how your specific requirements would work inside Bitrix. Okay, so let's kick off with a couple of questions that have come in during the week. How do I set permission structures on individual files that I've stored in the company drive? So it's relatively straightforward. So if we go into our drive in our system here, then we can select, let's just clock in on that, stop that flashing. We can select an individual file and it will give us access permissions link at the top here. So your files will take the permissions of the folders that they sit in by default. You can change that. So you could grant additional access to the standard permissions that you see. So I can select individual users or department or groups, work groups or project groups. So we could select the HR department and we can then give them one of these different access levels for that individual document. As I say, you can set permissions on folders and the files will inherit those permissions as well. If you're using work groups, then work groups have a drive each, and by default you're restricting access to only those members of the work group. So if we click on members at the top right hand side, nobody outside of this group of people will be able to access the files in there. I think though you can give access to people manually beyond those individuals. So I can select additional users. Yeah, it lets me select any user, whether they're a member of the group or not, and I can share a document with somebody who's not in that individual work group. So it's fairly straightforward. I think you just don't see the link until you actually tick one of these, and then you see the access permissions link. So that's probably why you couldn't find that. Also up here, you can download a lock documents. You can lock documents so people can't edit them or download them. And if you have them enabled, there we go, business processors. You can select processors, the standard processors that exist on documents. Main reason for business processors on documents is to request approval for documents before they become live in the system. Okay, let's have a look, see if we've got any more. We've got a couple of questions that have already come in. So is it possible to set a maximum session time? So it's not on the cloud. You can't do any, you'd have no settings for session times, but if you have a self-hosted edition, then you can do this. So on the self-hosted edition, you have this admin bar across the top, only visible to the administrators. And if I click on that show button, it drops it down, and I've got some tools to allow me to edit pages and do some other things on this, some other tools on that admin bar. But if I click into the control panel, then there's a back end which I can access, which allows me to do quite a lot of things. But if I go into settings, I can access my user list, and I can access user groups as well. So it works slightly differently on the on-premise in terms of the permissions. It's got an additional permissions structure in the control panel. So you create these user groups. Some are created by default. So by default, I think you have this administrator one, this employees one, and various others. But essentially, I might want to. I can create additional ones, but I can edit these existing ones. So if I go into my employees group, then we have different levels. So I have this default one. Let's check on one of these other standard default security levels. Let's go into medium, and then I think we should have in here we go, session maximum lifetime 20 minutes. So we can change that to suit what you want. So yes, you can. I think if we go to low, that will change 30 minutes. It's quite short, so it might be that you want to increase that. Can extranet users log in via the mobile app? They can. So the mobile app's free to use, free to download for anybody, and if you've got a username and password, then you can log in, and if you're an extranet user, it will default to your standard extranet permissions, so you'll only see, of course, what you're allowed to see. Can I turn off call recording? I don't need this feature on my system, so I assume you mean in respect of telephony, then you can do that. So if we click into telephony down here in our menu, and if you've already rented a number, you'll see your numbers up here. If you haven't already rented a number, you can rent a new number using this link over here. Go into your numbers and configure, click on configure, select the number if you've got more than one, click into configure. The question is, can I turn off call recording? Then all the settings for that sort of thing are in here. Save recordings of all calls, so you can disable that. If you've got it enabled, then you've got an additional option to play a warning about recording telephone calls to the caller, and you've got this additional setting about transcribing calls as well, so you can transcribe an audio call into text, and the purpose of that would be to be able to search then key by keyword those telephone calls. That is a plugin, an integration with Google, I believe, and so you pay for that. I think if you click on this link, it'll tell you how much you pay. It's probably about 5 cents, I think, a minute, something like that. So relatively expensive if you're not using it. So, but it's a good feature if you need to be able to search quickly content of telephone calls. Of course, if you're saving recordings, then they save to the contact, and you can play them back, and that's quite time consuming to go through them. Just show you where telephone calls are recorded. So if we go into our contacts, hopefully we've got some. There's no calls in there, but they're recorded in this activity stream. Can't see any on that one, but they sit essentially in the activity stream. So a quick look in this contact. So they record in the stream like this, and you're able to play them back at any time. So if you've got permission to access this contact here, then you'll get access to the call recording. So the way the CRM works, everything on the contact page, everything on the right hand side is it's a history of activities, whether they're notes that a user's typed in, whether they're email, incoming or outgoing emails, telephone calls, things like SMS are recorded as well. So it's a full activity stream of all your business's interaction with this particular contact. So you can integrate with your existing phone system or just use the out-of-the-box telephone numbers from Bitrix. It allows you to then click and call from the contact record and of course save those conversations. So if you have any questions, post them in the chat window inside Bitrix and I'll stay on for as long as we have questions coming in. We have a couple already. Is it possible to capture the location of my sales team who are out on client visits? So the way to capture a location of somebody is to check the IP address they've used when they've logged into the system, and you can do that with the self-hosted. It does record the IP address. All you would get is an IP address. You'd have to know what that relates to, what location that relates to. So we did do a system where we tagged IP addresses and users would be able to then see where their clients were. But not as standard can you see where users are. Of course, they're logging in on a mobile and things like that, then IP addresses are different. And recording location or trying to identify location by IP address can be unreliable. But if you know your clients, if you know the IP address that your client uses in their office, and you can get a copy of that, you could record that, and then you could develop a system that showed you exactly where your users were, what location they were logged in at. But you would need a self-hosted to do that. We can do that. We do get asked about GPS and things, but can't really use GPS with Bitrix. You can't really track someone's location via GPS. It's not a standard feature. Can app track sales team location in field and distance travelled? Okay, so that was similar to question before. Can apps track their location in the field? So it would only track their location if they're logged in. As I say, if you have the self-hosted edition, it does capture IP addresses, so it would capture them when they're logged in, but they would have to be logged in. It's not a tracker. It's not tracking people as they move around, only the point at which they log in. Obviously, if they move away from that IP address, then the system would log them out automatically anyway. It doesn't keep you logged in. So the next time you log back in, if it's at a different address, then it will be able to display that information. But they wouldn't then, the second part of your question, record distance travelled. It doesn't have any functionality built in to record that. We develop all sorts of systems for businesses that around this sort of area, so we could develop something for you, but not a standard. It doesn't do that as standard. I only want users to have access to their own leads. Is this possible? So it is possible. So every record inside Bitrix has a responsible person, and if you've put a lead on manually, then by default the responsible person becomes the person that's created the lead. But leads inside Bitrix are generated in many different ways. Incoming phone call can generate a new lead. Completion of a web form, you can build web forms inside the CRM, post them on your website, and when people fill those out, those can generate new leads for you. You can integrate with Facebook, incoming emails, all those sort of incoming messages from those different sources. They can all be set to generate leads for you. And if you take the web form example, then you could have multiple web forms for different products that you sell, and you might have different people that deal with different products. So each form can be assigned individually to a different person. So you just open up. We've got one here, which is generated from a CRM form, and you can see that this is the user who is responsible for this. Let me just check what the point of the question was. I only want users to access to access their own leads. This is possible. So yes, so you can. So a lead will have a responsible person, and you can restrict access to that person to only their own records. So if you go into settings, and you wouldn't see this settings link unless you're an admin, so you might need to speak to your admin. You go into settings and permissions and access permissions, then you can create a role. So let's say we have a sales executive role here. Let's click into the sales exec role, and we look down the left hand side onto leads, and we would change the access level for read to personal, and then also personal, update, personal. So they would be able to read, add, update, delete leads that they're personally responsible for. That would mean that they can't access see any of the leads in the system at all. What you may want to do is let them just be able to read leads from other people within their same department, or departments, or same department and departments that sit below them on the company structure, or just have all leads open for read but not to be able to edit or change or delete or any of those leads. So you create your permission settings in there. With leads you have different, if I toggle on this plus sign, you have different stages, and it is possible to check to create permissions on every individual stage. So when it's one, you might want to prevent let's say prevent the user from changing the content of a lead once it's been won. Once a lead's won, it converts into a company or a contact or a deal. You might want people in going in and changing details on there. So you can set permissions at each individual stage that a lead has, and they can change as the lead progresses through those different stages. And if we just save that, we've got a role. We can then assign that role as we have done here. Department Sales UK, all department employees for the UK sales department have this sales executive role. So so yeah, you can in answer to your question, restrict access to just the responsible person for a lead. On workflows, how I can have a third option, like more info is required for the approver to choose approved the document, decline the document, or request additional information buttons. Let me just read that again. On workflow, how I do have a third option, more info is required for the approver to choose the approved document. Yeah, I can show you an example of that. For the approved, choose the approved document. So you're talking about on documents. So let's see if we can go into a business process on documents. Let's go into a drive in a work group. So if we go into one of our drives and business processes, you can of course create a new business process, but you're talking about approving documents. So let's just look at a standard process, one here called first approval. And what you want is buttons for the approver to decline the document or request additional information. So what we have in here is this action block here, and this one doesn't allow you to add. All it has in this one is two buttons, so the accept button and the reject button, and you can rename those. So you can either accept or reject this, but you want to be able to add comments. So you need to use a different constructor, different different task. Let me just minimize these. So you have one called request extra info can be declined. So we would pull that action block in. So instead of this one, we'd use this one. And within this action block, you've still got the button to save or decline, the two buttons there. But at the bottom, we can create additional fields. So it might be that you want to create something like a date field. So you might be, when you send this document for approval, you might want to request approver. The approver submits a date when the document should be expire or something. So we can select create a custom field that would sit within this approval process. So let's select date. Let's call it expire date. And you can make it required so that it's mandatory. So this can't be approved without the user submitting info into this box. And we can save that. You can see that sits down there. You can have multiple fields. So in an approval, you could request multiple sets of information. Let's save that. I didn't put in anyone. Please provide employees. So you've got to set somebody who's going to be the approver, who we logged in as here. Logged in as John Smith. See if we can find this user, John Smith. I think somebody's changed. Let me just check who we're logged in as. Just come out of that for a second. We're logged in as Max Smith, so we need to select ourselves as the approver, Max Smith. Insert that. Need to give it a name. Put some description in there if you like. I'll have to create this field again. So it's expiry. You get a required field. Save that. Click save on that. Let me just save it and I'll show you what it looks like. So when a user bear with me a second. Go back into our drive, select one of our documents, select our business process. So it's our first approval. So now instead of the business process, in fact, let me select our user and submit. So as the first stage of the business process, it will create an assignment, and click into our workflows. We should have a workflow assignment in here. So this is our approval. It just says approve. We didn't put a description in there, but it's asking us we could have put a description in here, a bit of information or a bit of an instruction to the user. It's asking us to set an expiry date, and so I can put that in, and then I've still got the option to save or decline. And as I say, you can change the names of these buttons, and you can have multiple fields. This field here, comment, is a standard field. You can hide that box if all you want to do is request date field or something. So that's it. In website chat widget, how to force the user to enter the contact details before not sure you can. Let's have a look, see if we can see. Let's go into our contact center. Website widget. So the settings are all inside here, and you want them to force them to complete the form. There is something about the form inside here, but whether you can force them to complete it without being able to chat, I'm not 100% sure that you can do that. But if it exists, it's inside one of those settings within there. I'm guessing you can't. The form pops up as the chat conversation starts, and I don't think you can restrict them from continuing to chat without, can't make that form mandatory, I don't think. Does Bitrix integrate with any survey tools like SurveyMonkey? Doesn't integrate with SurveyMonkey as standard. So look, you can create, of course, website forms. Let me just see what integrations we've got first of all. If you go into your applications, then we could search whether there's an integration with SurveyMonkey. Nothing's showing up. So we could, if you had a self-hosted edition and you're doing a lot of work with SurveyMonkey, then it might be worth us developing that integration. That would be relatively straightforward. Alternatively, if you've only got one or two survey forms, it might be possible to rebuild those using the Bitrix form builder. So if we go into the CRM and we go into CRM forms, then let's just edit one of these forms that we have. So you can create your own web forms inside here, so you can pull in any fields that exist within any of these CRM modules, including any custom fields you can create. So you can create all your questions as custom fields. If you want the form to generate a lead, let's say for example, then create those custom fields as leads, and populate them inside your form. You can change the layout of this form and the running order. You can then you can add some rules in here, so you can create some questions that are dependent answers of previous questions. So yeah, we don't integrate with SurveyMonkey, but you might be able to achieve what you want to achieve using the standard Bitrix forms. Let's put our contact details up there. If you want to get in touch with us at any time, please do so on our email address sales@intraface.com or one of those telephone numbers, and we can arrange a consultation with you. So we'll if you're just evaluating Bitrix at the moment amongst other systems, we'll gather your requirements and we'll put together a tailored demo that will show you exactly how Bitrix can solve, can be a suitable solution for your needs. So today, you can ask any questions you want, but if you want a bit more in-depth detail, we put you in touch with a sales consultant here who will be able to give you a tailored demonstration. If you're already a Bitrix user, then you want some additional support, we provide telephone support. Get in touch with us and we can give you a quote for that sort of service. It's very good. You get put in touch with a dedicated contact who will learn about your business. You can contact them as many times as you want with questions. So if you want to get the most out of it, or you feel you're not getting as much out of the system as you'd like to, then our telephone support will be beneficial to you. In general request workflow, I would like to be able to ask some questions to the initiator before approval or decline the request. So the process goes back to the initiator and wait for a second answer. Okay, should be able to do that in general request. So general request is in the activity stream, the workflows section. This is general request. This is the form. And if we go into workflows here, workflows directory, have to be an admin to access the back end of these workflows. But if we click into general request, you want to ask questions of the initiator. Let's go into configure workflows, and here it is. So you would use the same action block that we looked at here, request extra information. So I don't know where you want to drop it in, set permissions, so use notification, approval document. So you'd probably, like we did before, instead of having this loop, you bring these up, these up into here. You could remove that. I didn't do that on the previous one. That I was just showing you an example. But this on the previous one, I should have moved those and deleted that, so that you've got this like this. But essentially, you do the same thing as before. You want to request, ask some questions of the initiator before approval to decline. So you can go into here and you can create request. You can create custom fields inside here. So the sort of fields that you can create that will become fields in the approver page are just text fields. So it might be that you just want to ask a question and give them a text block to be able to answer that question. You might want money fields. You might want to request a value that's associated with this request. Dates list is a drop-down list, so it might be that you give them a selection of answers and you say, you know, which one is it. All this information that you then collect, this additional information that you collect, you can then pull through to use, you know, as part of the process. Share it in an email that you're sending out to people, or whatever else. It's stored information that you can pull through. So that's probably the best way to do it. It might be that actually you don't delete what I deleted. Maybe you keep the approval down at the bottom, but you have this is a separate approval above it. So you can just then set the who is, you know, who's going to be the approver of that. So you can set that person, so as soon as they submit this, they'll get a workflow back, an assignment back with a series of questions. So you need to assign that to the author. I think you'd select author, so that would be the person that submits the request, and then they would receive an assignment back. But there is a different way of doing this, and which is probably actually simpler. So as part of the request, we go to template parameters at the top, and if we go into our parameters variables page, we can create additional variables, which are the questions that are asked at the beginning. Let me just see what else we've got in this one. Yeah, so you'd create additional variable fields, and by doing so, they would be, instead of just being asked, you know, in fact, you'd add it as a parameter. Sorry, but you'd add it as a parameter field. So instead of being asked as just the standard questions, they would get asked additional questions, and you can make these questions required fields. So give the question a name, select again what type of field it's going to be, and then save that. So instead of having an approval process where they submit it and then they get an assignment where they have to complete additional information, which is 2 steps, you could just add additional fields in the first form using this process. Let's leave there. I'd like to create a quote with a short product description and other version with long description, 2 separate fields in product. How would you suggest allowing salespeople to choose from either? A quote with a short product description and a long description. Let's have a look in quotes. Two separate fields in the product. How would you suggest allowing salespeople to choose from either? Well, let's open up a quote. Let's go back and open up one with some products on there. So when you select a product, you go into here and you select. You have your products built in a folder structure in here that you can categorize them, and then you select a product, and it brings through the description of the product. There's no way of having 2 separate fields in a product where a user can select one field or the other. The only thing that you can do, we just go into, so that would show up on there. If we go into the products page and open up one of these products and edit it, see if we can create, we can add a section. We can't add any custom fields inside products by the looks of it, so so you can't add custom fields to a product on the cloud edition. You can do that on the self-hosted edition. So I think you probably need a self-hosted edition, and that way you could create a custom field inside a product. So as well as the name of the product, the standard name of the product, you could have then a second field called a description. That would be a longer version description of the product itself. And then from the quote, when you generate your quote PDF, you could have 2 versions of that. So you could have one, so you've got the option to be able to design your own PDFs. You could have one called quote short descriptions and one quote long descriptions, and that long descriptions could pull through that custom field with the additional text onto the PDF. But you can do different quote PDF designs on the cloud edition of Bitrix, but if you can't do those custom fields in products, so you would need, if you wanted to do that, you would need the self-hosted edition. If you got in touch with us, we could show you exactly how that would work on the self-hosted edition. Why do you think the clock-in feature is not available for my agent's profile? Because your agent is, I'm guessing, an extranet user, and extranet users don't get access to clocking in feature. Clocking in tool is for your internal team, so you can monitor when they arrive and leave, when they start and finish work, but it's not available to extranet users. So if you wanted your agent to be able to clock in and clock out more like a main employee, they'd have to be a main user of the system. How to set up service ticketing. So generally we advise people to use tasks for service ticketing. So you could create either create a work group, work group for tasks, for tickets, call it tickets, and then when you create a ticket, add it to that project group. Or when you create a ticket, just tag them. You can put it into a project group called tickets, or you could give them a tag or you create a custom field down here called tickets and just tick the box, say that this is a ticket, and that would allow you then to filter tasks that are tickets. There is another way of doing that, which if you went into the CRM and companies, then you could create a business process with a form that runs on a company record. So this is the company I want to create a ticket for. I'd have a process in here called create tickets. We've got one called create project. We just open that. It would present you with a form like this. Some of these fields could be mandatory so that the user is forced to collect the information you need to open a ticket. So they'd fill this form out, the agent, your user would fill this form out. That would trigger a process that then creates a task, but it would categorize that task as a ticket. I could just show you quickly how to do that. If we go into settings, so that would be better than creating a task manually, because you'd make sure that it got categorized as a ticket in the correct way. If you go into settings and automation, business processes, we're going to create it on the company, and so we go into add template. So we call it ticket, and we want this to run not when added or changed, because that would run the process when a new company is added or when any field in a company is changed, but we're going to just run it manually. And we want to create some parameters which will be form fields that they would see when they click the process. The form will pop up. So you might want to create a field called problem. That would be a string, so they can use text in that field. You don't need to create the field called customer, because you can capture that information anyway, because you're running it on the customer record. If you wanted to create any other fields, like date, if it was a date field, you wanted the user to select the date it needs resolving by, then you can select a date field as well. Click save. So that would be the form that would pop up when you run the process. What you want to do is generate a task from that. Let's see if we can find create a task here. It might be you want to send out an email. You could send out an email. You might want to send out a notification or something like that with some information on here, but let's just remove that for now. Keep it simple. So we're going to generate our task. Task name is going to be called ticket. We're going to create it as Max Smith. We're going to make the responsible person Max Smith. These could be dynamic, so depending on what people submit in the form. And the task description is going to be the problem. So if we select on here, we can bring through the data from the field, the form field, the form that we're creating as part of this process. So you might want to put in a bit more description in there. We might want to put problem is, and then fixed by, and you can set any other fields you wanted to set. Let's click save and save. And so we have our process called ticket. If we go back into companies now, open up one of our companies that's got the issue, click into our business process, select the process called ticket, presents me with my form now. It's broken, I need it fixed by tomorrow. I click start. That will generate a task for me. Let's check that I've set all the permissions right. Probably, there it is. So it's not dropped it into a group. I could have selected a group called tickets to drop it in. I didn't do that as part of the process, but it's created the ticket. Just called it ticket. It might be that you actually want to bring in another reference that's unique into the description. You could do that, but it's brought in the description. Problem is, fix it by, could change who's going to be responsible. You could add more people into it so the whole team gets access to it. But I would say that using a form and a business process that runs on a company record is the best way to create a task as a ticket. If it was tagged, or it was put in the right group, you would then be able to use the filter at the top to look at all live tickets, and that would allow you to use tasks for other purposes, for projects that you're doing as well, and filter out tasks that are tickets. Let's just put our contact details up there for a second. In quote document PDF, is there a way to show hid fields dynamically based on field values? Sorry, is there a way to show stroke hide fields dynamically based on field values? No, there wouldn't be. There isn't a functionality to be able to do that. Of course, you can. In the document designer, you can download the Word document and then change. Should we just have a quick look? Let's go into one of these. Then you can go into your documents here. You can generate your documents, and if I go back into add new template, then I can download any of these templates, and in the settings at the top I can select any of the fields, the little references that I need to use for the fields. I copy these into my Word document, and that will then populate your design, your PDF template. But you can't do permissions or anything dynamically on that. So follow-up question is, or even a paid application to buy and integrate to be able to design the quote template dynamically in real time. So you can do it. If you have a self-hosted edition, we could customize it to do that. We do lots of little jobs like that allow you to do, to achieve that. I mean, quite often that I can see why you might need something like that. So if you want to get in touch with us, then we could quote you to do that work. I don't think there's a plugin. You could look in applications, but I don't think there's a plugin that does that. Anywhere we can create POs, so you can't create, don't have a purchase order system, but within the CRM, well, I mean, you could use. Yeah, you could use invoices as POs if you wanted to. We could actually rename that POs if you're not using it for invoicing. But in addition, you could create a list for POs. Let's just go into let's go into a list here. Inventory. I haven't got one for POs in here, but let's see if we've got one that's got some content in. So you could create a list for purchase orders. I can, you can generate a form with the fields you need, save that purchase order, purchase request item, and then you can have. We haven't got them enabled on here, but you can have business processes that run on these list items. So I could have a process that sits in here that says issue PO to supplier, and then I could select the supplier. So that's just essentially having a table of data with custom fields that you can trigger a process on. So a process would essentially just collect that information into an email and set, or PDF or something, send it to your supplier. So we don't have POs, but you can use lists. If you're not going to be using it too heavily, that a list might be suitable for that. Please, can you tell me if this CRM can fit service offering business module and moving from responsible to another without deal, close, or payment? Sorry, I don't understand what you mean by that question. If it would fit service offering business module. I mean, if your business sells a service rather than a product, then Bitrix is certainly suitable for selling services. If you're absolutely. And you just have to expand on the part that says, and moving from responsible to another without deal, close, or payment. So you can change responsible person on deals from one person to another. That can be done or manually, or it can be done automatically. So if we open up a deal here, then if I have permission, I can change who is responsible for it. But also you can create automation that does that. So based on the stage, based on what stage you've selected at the top, it can change responsible. So here at this stage, when we've approved this, it's changing the responsible person to this user here. So you can select who's going to be responsible for it. So can be done, yeah. We'll put our contact details up. So if you want to get in touch with us on any of those telephone numbers, if you want a one-to-one demo, then we can do that. If you're using the cloud or the self-hosted edition, we provide support packages, and in addition to that, we provide training. If you want a couple of hours training for your staff, either online or in your office, then we can do that. We have a field called company type, supplier, client, subcontractor, how to make all suppliers and subcontractors available to all users, but make clients available to their responsible person. We have a field called type, how to make all suppliers and subcontractors available to all users, make clients. So you want to change the access permissions based on a selection drop-down list, I guess. I'm not sure that we can do that, but let's have a look, see if we can understand what you mean. So if we had a deal, and inside your deal, it's a company type, isn't it? But it's the same principle. You have a company type inside your company, have a company type, and then based on what you select here, you want to change who can access that record. That can't be done as standard. Access permissions are based on responsible person, so who's responsible for that. You can then share that with people in the same team or teams below, but you can't do permissions based on different fields selected. We have developed something like that on the self-hosted again, but there's not a way of doing that for a cloud user. If you've got self-hosted, and get in touch with us and we could set something like that up for you. How can I make clock-in option available to every user instead of only main? And how do I know if my employees are using an extranet? You can't make the clock-in option available to every user, so that it's not available to extranet users at all. Okay, and we're going to wrap it up there. So if you want to subscribe to us on YouTube, then you receive notifications about when we do live sessions, but we do a session at the same time every week. So subscribe and click on notifications. And In addition to that, we have webinars which we run every Monday. If you go to Bitrix24.com, on the homepage there, you can register for webinars. But that's it for now. Thanks for your time. Bye for now.